And good evening. Yes, we're doing it live right here in the 5 o'clock hour, Yabba Dabba Do time in Los Angeles. We get right down to business here with the news-driven hour in the heart of drive time. Mottek On Money, 5 nights a week for you, live on the air here on 790 KABC, online streaming at KABC.com, and the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast at KABC.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Big day today. Stocks racking up the best day of gains since April as stocks extended gains into a fourth day. Benchmark government bond yields easing from recent highs. The market appears to be cheering signs the Fed might be done with raising interest rates after holding the line on short-term rates this week, but the debate on that continues. Big day today. We could be on track for the best week of the year. Tomorrow we'll be getting the big enchilada of monthly economic reports, and that is the monthly jobs report from the Labor Department. Today we saw the Dow pop 564 points at the closing bell, ending at 33,839. The S&P 500 gained 80 points, and the Nasdaq gained 233 points. Wall Street stepping up a four-day rally today, and it looks like we're seeing the financials and consumer discretionary sectors up nearly 6% on the week. They've been leading the market higher. The rally intensified after the Fed kept interest rates on hold yesterday. The main focus in the markets on the Fed's hints that rising bond yields have been doing some of its inflation-fighting work for it. We see the yield on the 10-year note now at 4.67%, near its lowest level seen in about 3 weeks. Jamie Dimon, the head of J.P. Morgan Chase, today, though, warned of the chance of additional rate hike, saying the mega bank, J.P. Morgan Chase, the largest bank in the country, was prepared in the event 10-year Treasury yields rise to 7 or 8%. Retreating bond yields did lift stocks today, with the S&P 500 poised to rise for a fourth day, putting it on pace for the biggest four-day percentage gain in nearly a year. Taking a look at some of the action here, we're, of course, watching the latest headlines in the Middle East. Hundreds of people were waiting to leave the Gaza Strip through its southern border as Israel's military largely cut off Gaza City in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. Israel's military said it had surrounded Gaza City as it forces moved to cut the enclave in two and isolate the northern part of the Strip. Airstrikes continuing. Israeli authorities said they would ensure safe passage for civilians who want to head south to escape the fighting. Meanwhile, the president said 74 Americans and family members had made it out of Gaza and called for a humanitarian pause in the war. Israel says at least 242 people were affected by Palestinian terrorists on October 7th, raising the number, which has changed as Israel identifies victims of the Hamas attack. Meanwhile, the House of Representatives voting to advance a $14.5 billion military aid package to Israel, but the bill appears to be dead on arrival after the leader of the Senate's Democratic majority, along with the White House, made clear that they would not sign off on legislation that does not include assistance for both Israel and Ukraine. Among the California Democrats voting against this military aid to Israel package, members of Congress Adam Schiff, Katie Porter, and Barbara Lee. The aid package pushed by the new House Speaker Mike Johnson also requires the emergency aid to be offset with buildings and cuts for the Internal Revenue Service, which Democrats approved last year. Meanwhile, funding for the entire U.S. government is set to expire on November 17th. Coming up here fast, we'll get an update tonight from taxpayer advocate Grover Norquist, president of Americans for Tax Reform. After the closing bell, the earnings parade continued with Apple in focus, failing to dispel Wall Street's concerns about a lackluster outlook for its hardware businesses and potential pressure on its position in China. As it announced quarterly earnings this afternoon, looks like Apple gained nearly $4 during the trading day to $177 and change, down about $6 now at $171 and change in after-hours trading. The homeless crisis in Los Angeles continues, and today the latest idea from the L.A. Mayor's office is to call on lawyers in the L.A. area to donate their time towards the prevention of evictions in Los Angeles. The mayor joining calls for free legal help by the nonprofit group The Mayor's Fund for Los Angeles, established nearly 10 years ago as a resource for Angelenos facing homelessness for whatever reasons. Meanwhile, the L.A. City Council has struck down a proposal for a 6-month extension of a pandemic-era ban on rent hikes that has covered most Los Angeles area apartments for the past 3.5 years. I'll discuss all that tonight with Daniel Yukelson, the executive director of the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, AI, crypto too, the Fed, interest rates, and the whole works. Joining us live now, money manager Gabriel Wisdom, co-founder and managing director at American Money Management here in Southern California, author of Wisdom on Value Investing. He's a conference speaker, too, and today was one of the keynote speakers of the Big Fall 2023 Education Symposium, organized by the San Diego County Treasurer Tax Collector Dan McAllister today at the San Diego College of Continuing Education. Gabriel Wisdom, thank you very much for taking the call here. I know you had a busy day, and it was a big update for a change. So give us your view of what just happened here.
Frank, first of all, it was great to see you live and in living color. And that was a great symposium. Thanks for having me on your panel.
Thank you.
I think what's going on is a rational amount of optimism about interest rates having reached a peak. The fact remains that the federal interest payments have doubled between 2015 and present day, with the government set to pay about $750 billion in net interest this year. By some estimates, interest payments become the government's single biggest expense within the next 20 years. Reason is that the federal government, the Treasury Secretary's office in particular, failed to refinance our debt like every individual did who owns a home or has a mortgage. Instead, we kept issuing 2 and 3 year, in some cases 6 and 12-month Treasury bills that paid almost nothing. So, that was great, but we could have issued 10 and 30-year bonds at less than 2%, and we wouldn't have this problem. But all this federal debt, the short-term debt coming due, and our interest cost now has risen some 300-fold and going higher. So that's a real drag on the system. How does that affect interest rates for 2024? Is the Federal Reserve really done? I just don't see it because inflation is so sticky. Now, we'll learn quite a bit from the jobs report, as you mentioned, which comes out tomorrow.
Right, and we hear from Jamie Dimon today, warning of the chance of additional rate hikes. And he says J.P. Morgan Chase, which is the nation's biggest bank, was preparing in the event the 10-year Treasury yields rise to 7 or 8%. Interesting that he would say that. Also, we heard from Double Line's Jeffrey Gundlach, the bond king based here in Los Angeles. He believes interest rates are going to fall as a recession arrives early in 2024. So we have a big debate going on here on where rates go from here.
Well, he may be right that interest rates fall in 2024 if we have a very hard landing, but that would be temporary in my view. And the reason for it is we created all these new dollars. We printed some several $1 trillion worth of money, and every central bank in the world was doing the same thing coming out of the pandemic, and now it all comes home to roost because it's inflationary. In fact, we saw the consumer discretionary area just this week. In September, prices for food services and accommodations rose some 6% year over year in September, as measured by the PCED. I mean, that's way higher than the 4.3% yearly rise in the non-housing services component of that measure. And Chipotle, McDonald's, Unilever, all the fast food companies are raising prices for food. Consumers are still eating out, but it's just it's not stopping. And the Federal Reserve is going to see this. This is what they're looking for. And I think they're going to hold steady higher for longer, as they're saying. Hello?
Did I lose you?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, Gabriel Wisdom. Yes, I can hear you. And let me ask you, we did get that breaking news on Sam Bankman-Fried. That is breaking news here that he's been found guilty on all criminal counts.
Yes, this is very big news, especially on a week that marks the 50th anniversary for Bitcoin. And let's face it, Bitcoin has become a real tradable commodity, whether it's a currency or not. Well, I guess so. When it was first issued in 2009, the people that issued it they spent $5 and received $5 in crypto Bitcoin. Well, how much is that initial $5 investment worth today? it's crazy. It's gone up by 3.4 billion%. So the recent price of 34,000 and change, your initial $5 investment would be worth over $173 million on this 15th year anniversary for Bitcoin. But there's been so much fraud, and that's what we're seeing with today's ruling.
Right. It's just coming over the wires here. So we want to inform the audience that Sam Bankman-Fried, the 31-year-old son of two Stanford legal scholars and graduate of MIT, was convicted of wire fraud and conspiracy to commit wire fraud against FTX customers and against Alameda Research lenders, conspiracy to commit securities fraud and conspiracy to commit commodities fraud against FTX investors, and conspiracy to commit money laundering, and pleaded guilty to all of the charges. This trial has been going on for some time. It started in early October. Bitcoin in all this, by the way, up about $15 here at $34,945. What are your thoughts on crypto and now this big verdict here? You think it might affect cryptos across the board, or might they actually be cheering this because this guy got nailed?
You know, Frank, Bitcoin owners and the whole crypto crowd have had to survive lots of frauds, lots of thefts, and most recently the FTX.com thing that resulted in the losses of billions of dollars. That's why Sam Bankman-Fried has been convicted. The cryptocurrencies and fraud seem to be the reason why so many governments are cracking down and doing everything they can to try and stamp it out. But either way, crypto, I think, is here to stay, especially Bitcoin, at least for now. And, you know, there's still a lot of optimism, but it's well down from its $60,000 per token high of a couple years ago.
All right. Apple, of course, a lot of people have Apple, follow Apple, and use Apple. And in fact, we're using it right now pretty much here. Apple failed to impress the Wall Street, and the stock had closed higher today, but has pulled back in after-hours trading. Have you had a chance to take a look at Apple's latest report, and where do you see Apple go from here?
Well, you know, there were certain segments, Frank, of their business where they were quite strong. It's the China segments that have been suffering because things have slowed down there, and plus there's this chips war of sorts between China and the U.S., so Apple's been affected, but they've got so much cash on the balance sheet that some of the earnings that we saw came from rising interest rates. Just keeping billions of dollars in money market, used to pay almost nothing, pays about 5% now. So, and this is happening for a lot of the crack.
How wrestling really works and how you get the ratings. Eric Bischoff and Conrad Thompson explain on 83 Weeks.
Too much time is spent discussing talent's age. The younger demo is just as excited about a Paul Heyman or a John Cena or an Undertaker or Becky Lynch, or I don't care what their birth certificate says, they're going to draw a younger demo because they're fun to watch and they're great entertainers.
83 Weeks on YouTube or wherever you listen.
The #1 selling product of its kind that delivers subtle, predictable results. Botox Cosmetic, out of botulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
Cash-rich companies. I think, while Apple is up 36% year to date, I certainly would not be a seller.
On the air live with Gabriel Wisdom with American Money Management. Any other specific places Gabriel Wisdom, where you are putting money now and or taking it off the table?
You know that last year, the worst performing sectors were in technology, oil, and gas. In fact, the Magnificent Seven of those companies, or the Mega Eight, as some people say: Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, Netflix, NVIDIA, Tesla, their Salesforce.com. All these companies were way down, well off their highs last year, and they've been, big performers this year. Same with oil and gas producers. So I'm looking at the worst performing industries of this year, industries that we really need. At the top of the list is solar, which is down on balance about 44%. The solar industry is experiencing a significant downturn due to the inflation, increasing interest rates. There's a declining demand for solar power systems because of the higher cost for consumers to buy. But we need solar, and I've noticed too that 51 hedge funds are long First Solar, a leader in the area. That's up from 39 hedge funds. So some of the analysts are starting to see this as a worst to first sector. I agree. I also like agriculture, biotechnology, banking, and even electric vehicles. They've all been down this year.
You're live with Gabriel Wisdom. And what about the banks here? We have obviously ongoing concerns about commercial real estate, which rocked the banking sector earlier this year. Let's not forget we had three big bank failures. For now, it looks like things have settled down. But what about the banks and what about commercial real estate?
The commercial real estate sector, I think, is in trouble until we see some legislation that makes it easier for these partially or entirely vacant buildings in major downtown areas, including Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego, to convert these office buildings to some other kind of uses, perhaps as residential and office complexes. But it's got to be easy to do this, not onerous with lots of bureaucracy, paperwork, and delays. Until that happens, I think it puts a lot of pressure on the regional banks because most of these commercial real estate loans were issued by the regional banks. And what Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan Chase said is an insider's view. If he thinks interest rates are going to be sharply higher next year, I think we pay attention.
All right, and then there is the price of oil with all this nervousness in the Middle East. We have seen oil pull back recently, and right now hovering at just below $83 a barrel. Where do you see the price of oil go from here?
Yeah, it's interesting, Frank. Gas prices have fallen even with oil, in that $90, $85, $90 a barrel range. And the reason is that there's just too much of it. We've had supply that's increased, and also people are driving a little bit less. The work-at-home situation. But what I like about many of the oil and gas and traditional energy companies is they're getting involved in alternative energy. One area that some of them have paid very close attention to is hydrogen, which is a naturally produced element, and it could power the whole world. When hydrogen combusts, it throws off only water with no carbon dioxide at all. Now, to separate hydrogen from the other elements, you need traditional energy, fossil fuels, or you can use solar energy. Then you've got pure green hydrogen. We're seeing some of this emphasized among the traditional energy companies, and I think it's exciting.
Fantastic. Well, Gabriel, thanks very much for taking the call. Great seeing you today. Money manager Gabriel Wisdom, co-founder and managing director at American Money Management here in Southern California, author of Wisdom on Value Investing. Gabriel, have a great evening, and thanks again for the great call tonight.
Thank you, Frank.
All right, and we want to repeat the big news here this evening, the breaking news that Sam Bankman-Fried was found guilty on all counts he faced. The so-called crypto king, Sam Bankman-Fried, convicted of plundering billions of dollars in the collapse of FTX, the crypto platform. Bankman-Fried found guilty by a federal jury today after the collapse of his crypto exchange revealed that $8 billion in customer money had disappeared. The FTX founder, Sam Bankman-Fried, who just over a year ago was the king of the crypto world and a multi-billionaire before turning 30, was convicted of siphoning off billions of dollars in customer money and using it to build his own empire of enormous wealth and power, as well as making political donations. He faces more than 100 years in prison.
Friends, people like you and me have our ears to the ground in all things business. We like to be informed and well prepared. And as important as finance is, I want you to have a plan just in case you're hit by someone not paying attention on the road. Thinking ahead serves us well, and even still, we can get caught off guard as people are so focused on their destination or whatever, they might not have a plan if they're in an accident. That's not their fault, and that's why I encourage you to put my friend, Attorney Clark Fielding's number in your phone under the word accident, 833-88-SHARK. So if you're hurt in an accident, you'll be ready with your strategy to make Clark Fielding your very first call. Fielding Law aims for the highest possible settlement, considering you might need long-term care, rehabilitation, compensation for lost wages, and any ongoing physical or emotional pain. So if you're hurt in any kind of accident, call for a free consultation with Fielding Law. You can really trust them. They're honest, respected, and your strategy in case you get into that unexpected accident. Motorcycle, truck, pedestrian, scooter, hit and run, boating, or bicycle accidents, call 833-88-SHARK, 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. 790 KBC welcomes Richard Marx Solo and KT Tunstall coming to the Cerritos Center for the Performing Arts November 12th. Tickets on sale now at CerritosCenter.com. And right now, caller 9 wins at 1-888-790-5222. You can get a pair of tickets to the show if you're caller 9. Call right now, 1-888-790-5222. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC, repeating the top story. The founder of FTX, the crypto platform FTX, founder Sam Bankman-Fried, guilty on all criminal charges. Just over a year ago, he was the king of the crypto world and a multi-billionaire before turning 30. Was just convicted of siphoning off billions of dollars in customer money and using it to build his own empire. The conviction of 7 counts related to fraud and money laundering marked the end of a stunning reversal of fortune for Sam Bankman-Fried, from a mop-topped crypto wonderkind hobnobbing with A-list celebrities and politicians to a convicted felon responsible for plundering the accounts of over 1 million customers of his crypto exchange. MarketWatch reporting despite Bankman-Fried's claims that he had been uninvolved in day-to-day management of a related investment fund that helped rip a gigantic hole in FTX's books, the jury agreed with the federal prosecutor's argument that Bankman-Fried had operated a pyramid of deceit. His lawyer had countered that his client, now 31, was simply a math nerd who had made many mistakes but had never had any criminal intent. Prosecutors alleged that Bankman-Fried had consistently lied to the public that their money would be safe in his exchange, which he claimed had the highest level risk management protocols. The case largely centered around the relationship between FTX and its sister company Alameda Research, which Bankman-Fried had created as an investment arm and hedge fund, but whose risky bets ultimately caused both companies to collapse. Again, repeating this top story, Sam Bankman-Fried convicted of plundering billions in the collapse of FTX. Winning day for the stock market today. The Dow 564 points at 33,839. The S&P 500 moved up 80 to 4,318. The Nasdaq gained 233 at 13,294. Bitcoin right now of about $15 at 34,945. Ethereum down 5 at 1,800. Doge at 7 cents. Apple on its earnings news down more than $6 in after-hours trading at 171 and change. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Turning now to what's happening in Washington. The House voting today to advance $14.5 billion in military help for Israel, but the bill appears to be dead on arrival after the leader of the U.S. Senate's Democratic majority, along with the White House, made clear that they would not sign off on legislation that does not include assistance for both Israel and Ukraine. Among the California Democrats voting against this military aid to Israel package, members of Congress Adam Schiff, Katie Porter, and Barbara Lee. The aid package pushed by the new House Speaker Mike Johnson also requires the emergency aid to be offset with billions of dollars in cuts from the Internal Revenue Service, which Democrats approved last year. Meanwhile, funding for the entire U.S. federal government is set to expire on November 17th. Let's bring in America's leading taxpayer advocate, Grover Norquist, now president of Americans for Tax Reform, who's been following all of this closely with a ringside seat in Washington. Grover, thank you very much for taking the call and give us an update on what's happening there.
Oh, absolutely. Good news. Congress, the House of Representatives, voted for $14.5 billion plus in aid for Israel for their defense. And they said, you know what, we're not going to add this cost to the backs of the American taxpayers. We will reduce from planned spending $14.5 billion. Remember, Biden said we're going to add $80 billion to hire 87,000 IRS agents. We're not going to do that. We dropped it by $20 billion a number of months ago. We're going to say take it down by another $14.5 billion. So Israel.
Half redneck, half posh. 100% fun. Trey Croward and Corey Ryan Forrester try and learn fancy culture in Putting On Airs.
The host of the Medium Popcorn Podcast, Brandon Collins and Justin Brown.
Okay, so Paddington 2 had like 100% on Rotten Tomatoes for you.
You guys ruined that?
Justin came in and like took it down like 2 points because of his rating. That's the time we started getting death threats.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. People worship that movie.
Putting On Airs. The podcast is on YouTube and wherever you listen.
Gets the aid. We spend less money hiring IRS agents to harass people. And, there's been really tragic situations at the IRS where they've sent IRS agents out, tragic, awful, where they go out and harass people who are testifying before Congress that day, where an IRS agent shows up at their home, where 30 million different documents that Americans sent into the IRS, that here's my document that shows what I'm doing. They destroyed the IRS 30 million documents secretly, didn't admit that they did it. And then they went after people and sued them and said, you didn't send us this piece of information, this paper. Yeah, I did. The IRS burned it, which they had to admit was true. The IRS has been abusing their power. And the answer is, we're not going to give you more money until you reform. Very important. So, wonderful thing. Help the Israelis deal with their defenses, to reduce the amount of money flowing to the IRS until they reform how they behave. And every single Democrat voted no. Or almost. There may have been, there were 10 who voted yes. 10 who voted yes.
All right, and it appears now this bill appears to be dead on arrival based on the latest reports I'm seeing here out of Washington after the Senate's Democratic majority, along with the White House, said that they would not sign off on legislation. Where does this urgent aid for Israel package go from here, in your view?
Well, the president and the Senate said it was dead on arrival when Republicans said we need to negotiate to reduce spending to increase the debt ceiling. If we want to increase the debt ceiling, we need to reduce spending over time. The president said, I won't negotiate. Senate said they wouldn't negotiate. They, in fact, did. So it's not dead on arrival. The Democrat position is we don't care about Israel and their aid. We want to protect IRS agents. We will have that conversation for some time in front of the American people. And the American people can say, listen, the Democrats prefer IRS agents to helping Israel. The Republicans are willing to help Israel, but not to add debt to the American people's backs. So we're going to reduce spending there. Actually, I think this is a debate to have for as long as the Democrats want to have it.
All right. And what about aid to Ukraine at this point?
That is something that's going to come back to the Senate, the Republicans in the Senate. A majority of the House and the Senate wish to have aid to Ukraine. And that will probably come back in another piece of legislation, just not necessarily this one. So there will be a vote on aid to Ukraine. I think Ukraine will get the aid that they're asking for. Right now, the Russians are trying to destroy that country, and they're looking to threaten all of Eastern Europe. I'm very sympathetic to the challenges there. That will be solved. It'll be a different piece of legislation.
All right, and then we got that November 17th deadline approaching. What's going to be happening between now and then? Will it be another fight down to the wire, or will we see a government shutdown?
I don't think there'll be a government shutdown. If there is, we've had many government shutdowns in recent years. We all know that all government workers get paid anyway. Everything gets solved. It really isn't the world doesn't end, the dollar doesn't fall apart. we should pass legislation that says if we don't pass continuing spending, spending continues at last year's numbers, not at something different. And so, which is what states do. I think it's a very easy thing to fix. Some people like the idea of threatening to shut the government down if they don't get their way. They don't get their way when that happens. So we do need to come and pass a law that says, look, in the future, if we can't come to an agreement on budgets, and ever since the Republicans took control of Congress, the Democrats have refused to do budgets. So they just do the continuing resolutions because they don't want to have to vote on decisions on how to spend money. They'd like to have it done secretly when they were in charge. Now that the Republicans have had the House and the Senate half the time since 1994, the Ds have literally said, we just aren't doing budgets anymore. That is a one-party problem. It's their decision. At some point, we should fix it.
All right, since you have a ringside seat there, anything else we need to know as the political dust settled since the new House Speaker took that position, House Speaker Mike Johnson? Anything else there that's on the radar?
Well, the first decision that the new Speaker made that made news was when they said we're going to give aid to Israel. Do you just borrow the money for that? Do you reduce spending somewhere else? Do you raise taxes to pay for it? And he said, we want to help Israel. We will not raise taxes. We will reduce spending. And the spending they came up to reduce was IRS spending. I think that shows really good judgment at all levels on his part. He's off to a good start. He really does have broad support within the Republican caucus. But keep in mind, when people say the world was ending and being so confusing, McCarthy of California got 96% of the Republican vote for Speaker. The new Speaker, Johnson, got 100%, 4% different, 8 votes. The Republican Party is not falling apart. There were 8 people who voted one way and then shifted back, okay? That is not a party in turmoil. That is 8 people who were focused not on what was good for the country or the Republican Party, but for their own reasons, they voted oddly. I think we're now seeing what a small kerfuffle that was, how silly that earlier fight was, and how meaningless it was, and the people who put us through it really have something to answer for.
Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform, America's leading taxpayer advocate. Grover, always great to have you with us. Thank you very much for that important update here tonight.
Good to be with you.
Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. The homeless crisis in Los Angeles continues, and today the latest idea from the LA mayor is to call on lawyers in the Los Angeles area to donate their time towards the prevention of evictions in Los Angeles. Meanwhile, the LA City Council has struck down a plan for a 6-month extension on a pandemic-era ban on rent hikes that has covered most Los Angeles area apartments for the past 3.5 years. Meanwhile, a lot of landlords are hanging by a thread at this point. Let's bring in Daniel Ukelson, Executive Director of the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles. Thank you very much for taking the call and give us your reaction to this latest news here today.
Well, good evening, Frank. And, it's interesting that Councilmember Soto Martinez wanted to extend the freeze on rent increases when, he's a guy who makes $220,000 a year as a council member, and he's in a rent-controlled apartment. Of course, he's got a conflict of interest there, but, the LA City Council, I don't think, has ever seen a conflict of interest that they didn't like. It's unfortunate there. And, fortunately, the proposal that he made to continue the freeze on rent increases did not make it through the Housing Committee, which is stacked by a bunch of Democratic Socialist Party candidates. Even they wouldn't vote for it. But what they did vote to do is send to the City Council a maximum rent cap of 4%, where we would have really received a 7% increase under normal circumstances. So that part is unfortunate. As you know, it's been a big struggle for the past 3.5 years under huge inflationary pressures. And now, of course, our entire insurance market is in just a complete mess where property owners cannot renew their policies. They have to go to the state under the FAIR plan, and they're getting renewals or they're getting insurance for 2, 3, 4 times what they had paid before if they're fortunate enough to get a renewal. And in some cases, insurance companies to renew policies are requiring that major improvements be made to properties, like replacing piping, replacing electrical wiring. Some cases, electrical panels have been banned by the remaining insurance companies we have in the California market, and it costs $50,000 to $80,000 to sometimes replace these electrical panels, depending on the size of your building. So everything is just careening out of control for rental property owners, and the city doesn't care. They would assume that we give away our housing services for free. And then, of course, Mayor Bass has come up with her latest and greatest proposal. I have to say, I liked Mayor Bass a lot more when she was in Washington, D.C., because her really bad ideas didn't impact us that much here in Los Angeles. But, of course, now she's here, and, we have to deal with her. And, she's calling upon legal aid groups to provide pro bono legal services to renters that are facing eviction. Of course, the city doesn't have money to pay attorneys because, what Mayor Bass is basically doing today is running a Ponzi scheme. The city can't afford to pay its own bills, and it's got huge pension liabilities that it'll never be able to overcome. And, the problem is that, these are not illegal evictions, that are going on here. Over 80% of evictions are due to non-payment, and there's really no dispute there. And there's really no way to evict somebody illegally because they didn't pay their rent. They didn't pay their rent. And the issue is really based on affordability. And what the city has proposed is they want to put together, out of the Measure ULA money, which is that exorbitant real estate transfer tax of 5.5% over 10 million, 4% over 5 million, the real estate sales, what they propose to do is put together this huge, $20 million or so initial fund to pay for some private attorneys out of that tax money. And unfortunately, what renters need to stay housed is they need help paying their rent. A lot of times, renters have found themselves in trouble because they have a major car repair, some medical issues, and they have a temporary job loss. And so they need what we call our shallow subsidies, grants of, a few $1,000s, maybe pay the rent for 3 to 6 months, or give a loan of $5,000 to $6,000 to help them get over the hump so they don't get behind on their rent. But, that's really the issue out there, that the city wants to pay private attorneys a couple $100s an hour. And if they would just provide some of these subsidies to renters, they would be able to stay housed and the money would go a lot further. And, here we are today. Unfortunately, property owners have shouldered the burden of what has been estimated at $1 billion of outstanding COVID rental debt, not accounting for what has occurred after some of these eviction moratoriums have expired. And our association has estimated that we've lost over $3 billion of rent increases in the past 3.5 years. And, that could be even more. So, property owners have, given all they can at this point, and they really are suffering. And we haven't even accounted for what is going to be happening in the future when some of these loans reset and owners have to refinance at much higher interest rates. A lot of rental property owners who own 5 or more units, or all that own 5 or more units, need to refinance their loans every 5 to 10 years, and most at 7 years. And they're not going to see the 3.5% or lower rates that we saw in years past. Rates are at 8%, and mortgages are going to double, and people aren't going to be able to keep up.
Yeah. That is quite an update, Daniel Ukelson. Wish we had more time, but we will stay on this very important issue here. Daniel Ukelson, Executive Director of the Apartment Association of Greater Los Angeles, live with us here tonight on Mottek On Money on 790 KABC. Stay tuned now for the 790 KABC News Blitz with Royal Oaks. We'll catch you again in the 5 o'clock hour tomorrow evening. This is Mottek On Money on 790 KABC.
Are you ready to focus on what you're truly passionate about? At the University of Massachusetts Amherst, we're committed to helping students design a meaningful path for their future. As one of the country's top-tier public research universities, we're helping drive the world forward, empowering students to challenge convention, champion innovation, and embrace the freedom of affecting real positive change in the world. Tap now to explore flexible options for a high-quality education or visit umass.edu. Be revolutionary.